Welcome, Gina Trimarco Clotter, to the Breath Pack podcast. This is a very full circle moment.
It is, isn't it?
It is, because this podcast would not exist if Gina and I had not started a podcast, which Gina really kind of dragged me along and then dragged me along some more. And then I tried to quit on her. And then I eventually did quit on her. And the Women Your Mother Warned You About podcast, which is still running and is still fantastic. And sometimes I come back on. And Gina basically was my mentor for me to be able to make this podcast happen in cooperation with my producer Nian. And I just thank you for that and so many other things. And welcome
You're
to the
so
podcast.
welcome. Well, thank you. Thank you. I'm so happy that you're doing this podcast and that you learned along the way. I mean, I think that's pretty cool.
It's way cool. And I mean, Gina has been so much more to me than just a podcast co-host. I started out with Gina. Well, first I started out stalking Gina because I saw her on Facebook doing some sales training, and I kind of stalked her for a while. And actually, even before that, I think I was wandering around the North Myrtle Beach Mall, the whatever it's called, Colonial
Oh,
Mall,
yeah.
and saw the improv theater, Carolina Improv, back in the day. And I was like, who's this Gina person? And then stalked you. And then I engaged Gina as my very first business coach. And since then, I mean, I've had many, many adventures with Gina.
Mm-hmm.
That
You
sort
have.
of sums it up, doesn't it?
That is a
In,
good that is a good summary, yeah.
in a nutshell. And really, I want to take Gina back to Gina is so many things and has been so many things, is becoming so many things. Gina's true sweet spot, in my opinion, is the art of improv. And the yes and concept that I've learned from Gina has been so transformative in so many areas of my life. So I want to take you back to, how did you first learn about improv and how did you get into it?
Sure. It's a great, fun little story that I love to tell, which I started out as an accounting major in college, which makes no sense because I'm not good at math. But I did it to appease my, excuse me, my dad, who thought being an accountant would be a good way to go. You know, this is a guy who didn't finish grade school. And as we know, my dad was also, may have worked for the mob and was much older and, you know, very street-ish smart and street smartish. And so being an accountant made sense. So it was really against the grain of who I was. I grew up pretty creatively, like you, all the things, art and dance and voice and you name it, I did it. So I always had this creative side. I was feeling really addicted in college, being an accounting major. I got involved with the arts in college. And then, long story short, had like this midlife crisis my freshman year of college. Sought out another, like, what should I do? Tried to like check out other schools, and ended up someone recommended I take an improv class. And so, being from Chicago, the center of improv, I went and started taking improv classes at Second City. I didn't know that was an option. And by sophomore year, I had changed my major to journalism. Because of that, I found this, you know, that side of me. And so it's in my life pretty early. And I found the power of it pretty early, of how transformational it was, of being in this yes and mindset, open mindset, anything is possible mindset. I can change my major. I can be whatever I want to be, stay in the mindset of yes and so that became my mantra at a really young age. That really kind of transformed my whole path of like going into journalism, going into radio, TV, film, becoming a marketing director, becoming a PR person, like all those things. That's where I got started with improv. And quick side note, I did want to be discovered for Saturday Night Live. I did not get discovered. And I tried getting an agent. They told me I was too ethnic looking, did not make sense to me. And then I realized that, because that's funny if you look at how we are today in the world, ethnic, come on. And then I realized I kind of like to eat and have things. So I decided I'm not going to be an actress in front of the camera. I'm going to be on the other side of the camera because I think I'll have a more stable paycheck that way. So that's kind of how it all got started. But then it left me for a while, but it kept following me. And then it followed me to Myrtle Beach. I'll leave it there for now.
There we
I,
go. I remember, and it's so funny, the first time, because I lived in Chicago for a little bit and I went to Second City. And I think I just went on my own by myself because I did a lot of things by myself back then. And I remember sitting in there going, what the fuck is going on? How come these people don't know what they're doing up there? Like they're just making this up. Like I did not understand what
uh-huh.
improv was at
Yeah.
all. And I just thought, didn't these people rehearse for this? And it really literally wasn't until I met you that I came to understand kind of what the premise of improv is. And I mean, I understood improvisation in terms of dance, like kind of making it up as you go along, but the actual art of improv and improv theater is a whole thing that
Mm-hmm.
I was just like, did not get.
Yeah. Yeah. We're literally making it up for real.
Yeah. And
Which
it's fascinating. Like when I finally went to one of your shows at Carolina Improv, with like the frame of understanding what was going on, it was so entertaining and just I was laughing out loud at where the stories would go.
well, part of the laughter comes from like that unknown of like, what are they gonna do? And even if it wasn't good, it was still good.
Yeah.
Because it's the failure that's good. People love to watch you fail. So it's like you can't lose.
So failure, we'll circle back to failure. I
Mm-hmm.
want you to, if you would, because the yes and concept is probably one of the most valuable pieces of mentorship that I've ever received in my life. If you would just describe like yes and 101
Sure,
to the
sure.
audience.
So there's two parts to yes and. It's so funny. I just walked through this with my publisher because I am writing a book called Improvised Intelligence. And there's two parts, right? There is the mythology and the philosophy of yes and there is the literal form of yes and. So mythology. Yes and can be looked at as a mindset of acceptance versus agreement. So I'm staying open-minded. Yes and yes, we can do that. And if someone comes to you and like, I have this really great idea. Okay, I want to hear you. I want to hear you out. So the concept of yes and is being in this place of, I don't got to agree with you, Rachel. God knows, Rachel, I have not agreed with you on a lot of things, right? I don't got to agree with you, and I have to just be open to accepting that that's where you're coming from, or that's your point of view, or that's how you feel, and that's your belief, and that's your value. Doesn't mean I got to agree with it. And that doesn't mean I have to hate you for it. Right. So often we disagree with people, and then that creates this judgment of like, well, we don't agree. So I'm going to judge you. Yes, it's the opposite of that. I don't got to judge you. Oh, that's how you feel. Okay. It's just a pure acceptance, and you can apply that to anything in your world of like, I'm accepting where that's coming from. So there's the literal part because people hear the word yes and they're like, I can't say yes to everything. Yes, you cannot say yes to everything. And right, so it's just so conditioned of saying yes and. Let's talk about the literal phrase of yes but. Right? Yes, but we know is a big no. Yes, but everything that you said up until the but is now canceled out. And yet we are conditioned to yes, but. And I guarantee you, watch your children because they do it because you taught them. We go into this automatic yes, but to protect ourselves because we don't want to overcommit, because we want our point of view to go out, because we think saying yes, but sounds nice. People tell me, well, I'm like, why do you say it? Well, because it sounds like I'm saying yes, and then I can say no. I go, okay, let's flip the script for a second. How does it feel when someone yes buts you? Well, it doesn't feel nice. Oh, but it's okay when you say it. You don't like it. It's okay. It's okay if you say it. So what's happening in our brain and our amygdala, and you and I are very into this neuroscience stuff. the brain hears yes, but the brain goes into fight or flight. Because like, oh, here it comes. Just think about anytime someone, you can hear the but in their throat before it comes out of their mouth, right? You
Mm-hmm.
hear like, yes, talking about breath, right? You hear the breath and you're like, but what? You're already in there going, but what? Even if you're not saying it out loud, you're saying it in your head. And so your amygdala is going crazy, going, this is a yes, butter. I don't like them. So already people are making judgment calls about you just on the fact that you say yes, but. So if we replace the word but with the word and, it actually disrupts the brain. Because the brain is expecting a but and it's getting an and it's like, whoa, what just happened? Are you actually listening to me? So that's the mythology, like the mindset, and then the literal aspect of it. And they work hand in hand.
I love it. And I have been so well schooled, trained, mentored by Gina about using yes and that I will constantly course correct myself if I hardly ever say but, or I will and I will like correct myself
You
with my
swallow it, you swallow the butt before it comes out.
yeah. And I definitely use it with my husband. I definitely use it with my children, especially, and it's just the most helpful thing. I mean, it's great for sales, it's great in theater. It's just a great tool to use because when you yes and somebody, they feel validated. And even like Gina is saying, if you completely are on the opposite end of the spectrum of what they're saying, they feel validated and the conversation can continue. Whereas I'm pretty sure that the listeners can agree that when somebody yes butts you, it sends you in that fight or flight. You can immediately feel the adrenaline rush of like, let's battle. And the yes and it's a magical tool. I'm just so glad that Gina could explain that so well. I just love it.
It's such a great way to slow down a conversation because
Mm.
you're like, all right, I can't use the word but and then it causes you, and I see you do it all the time, and it causes you to sit in it, be present, and to think about it. And that's all people really want. People want to feel heard and validated, and they want you to take your time before you have a rapid response. Because a rapid response basically says, I've got an agenda, get out of my way. I don't really care what you have to say. And I was describing this to my publisher yesterday as we were knocking out chapter 1, because this kicks off the book. And she just bust out laughing at one point. I go, what is so funny? She's like, I just got into this argument with my assistant. She kept yes butting me. And I kept saying to her, stop saying but. Right. Because I was trying to explain to her, I'm like, that word but triggers people. She's like, oh my God, it does. It's a trigger. And you don't even realize that you're triggered by it, but you're already getting angry at someone over it. And now you're like, I don't like this person. I don't want. She's like, I was just like, I'm not going to even go on with all the things she was saying, but she was not happy with hearing the word but, and she never realized what that was about.
Yeah. And
It's
it's
that
definitely,
subliminal.
yeah, it is. And I don't care what pursuit you're in out there, whether you're an athlete, a high performing salesperson, you're a badass supermom, this tool will help you to improve relationships. I find that using yes and helps improve the relationship because it improves the dialogue. It keeps the dialogue going because, as you're saying, as soon as somebody hears yes, but they shut down. They don't. They're like they're done, and everything's all about relationships. That's the very first thing my husband said when I first met him. That was the first phrase out of his mouth. It's all about relationships. And he was right that he's almost always right. God love him. And the way that you can cultivate all relationships, whether it be with your, coach to client or prospect to a salesperson, or mom to child, or husband to wife, is to make the other person feel like their space that they hold on this earth is important, that their opinion is important, that they are validated, and that they can trust that you are not going to, as Gina just said, judge them and discredit them for what they think. Because it's a hard world we live in, where everybody's judging everybody of everything. I mean, just on the way home from school today, Roxy was mentioning, how come high school students like are so rude to each other? How come they make fun of each other in this way and that way and use these words? And I'm like, they just are not thinking ahead. They're not necessarily able to empathize that, like, everyone wants to be validated. And the way that you can really optimize your own life is to find ways to feel validated. Most of it you've got to find inside